You know, when it comes to running an economy, there's this huge nagging question. Should the government be in the driver's seat, actively steering things, or should it just set some basic rules and then get out of the way? Well, that fundamental question is right at the heart of one of the greatest debates in economics, the epic battle between fiscal and monetary policy. Let's dive in.
To really get this, we have to go back. Picture this. It's 1968, a seriously turbulent year. Two absolute giants of economics get on a stage to publicly debate the very soul of economic policy, for the first time ever. And trust me, this was not just some stuffy academic chat. This was a high-stakes showdown for the future of the American economy.
So, who were the contenders? In one corner, you had Walter Heller. He was the champion of the new economics, and he advised presidents like Kennedy and Johnson. His whole thing was that the government has the tools and the duty to fine-tune the economy. And in the other corner, the one and only Milton Friedman, leader of the monetarist Chicago school and an advisor to Nixon and Goldwater. And his view? Well, it was radically different.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to break down this legendary confrontation into 6 key rounds. We'll dig into their core arguments, see how they could look at the exact same event and see completely different things, and really get a grip on what was truly at stake.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it. At the end of the day, this entire massive debate really boils down to one simple question. Who or what should be in the driver's seat of our economy?
You know, Heller was pretty smart about how he framed this debate right from the get-go. He wasn't trying to argue that money is irrelevant. Of course not. He basically said, look, we all agree money matters. The real question is it the only thing that matters? Is it the one and only lever driving this whole machine?
So let's unpack Heller's side of the argument. What was his big idea? Well, his case was all about the power of the government to manage the economy using 2 very direct tools: taxes and spending. And that, in a nutshell, is fiscal policy. It's the government's hands-on toolkit. Think about it. Cutting taxes to put more cash in your pocket, or ramping up government spending to kickstart projects and create jobs. That's fiscal policy in action. Now, it's super important to get this straight. Heller wasn't saying it's fiscal policy or nothing. Not at all. He was all about balance and flexibility. For him, the secret sauce to a healthy economy was finding the right mix of all the tools in the toolbox and knowing when to use each one.
And then he went on the offensive. He started poking holes in the monetarist argument, asking some really tough questions. Like, okay, you guys are all about the money supply, but which one? How do you even measure it? And can you really just ignore interest rates? Oh, and by the way, if your policies take forever to work and you can't predict when they'll kick in, how can you rely on them? Okay, so that's Heller's position. Now let's flip the coin for Friedman's powerful counter-argument. Friedman was deeply skeptical of government meddling. He argued that all this focus on taxes and spending was just a distraction. For him, the true engine of the economy, the only thing that really mattered in the long run, was the money supply, period. And you have to understand, this was a radical thing to say back then. Friedman's position was that, by itself, the government's budget has almost zero effect on the big stuff: inflation, recessions, booms, and busts. Whether the government was spending more than it took in, he argued it was mostly irrelevant to the economy's path.
And he had this brilliant way of explaining his logic. Let's walk through it. Say the government raises taxes by $10 billion. Okay? Taxpayers now have $10 billion less to spend. But wait, the government also needs to borrow $10 billion less. So where does that money go? It doesn't just vanish. It stays in the public's hands, free to be lent out or invested. The end result, according to Friedman, it's basically a wash. The government just shuffled money from one pocket to another.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating, because this is where the rubber meets the road. These 2 totally opposite theories led them to look at the exact same major historical event, the famous Kennedy tax cut of 1964, and come to completely different conclusions.
For Heller, who actually helped design the thing, the tax cut was a slam dunk. It was Exhibit A for why fiscal policy worked. He argued the economy was being choked by something called fiscal drag. Basically, the government was sucking too much money out. The tax cut took that weight off the economy's back, and boom. Just like they predicted, it took off like a rocket.
But Friedman came back with, not so fast. He had a totally different story. He pointed to the data and said, hey, wait a minute, look at the timing here. The money supply started growing before the tax cut even happened. So for him, the boom that followed wasn't a fiscal victory at all. The tax cut was just a coincidence. The real hero of the story was monetary policy that had already been put in motion.
You see, this whole fight over one tax cut wasn't really about the tax cut. It reveals a much deeper, almost philosophical clash about the right way to manage an economy. It's really a debate about whether you trust human judgment or whether you trust a system.
And this is the core of it all. Heller was on team discretion. He saw policymakers as skilled pilots, constantly adjusting the controls to fine-tune the economy and navigate any turbulence. Friedman, on the other hand, was on team automatic rules. He believed politicians and human error made fine-tuning way too dangerous. He wanted an autopilot. Just set the money supply to grow at a slow, steady rate and then leave it alone.
So, okay, this all happened decades ago. Why are we still talking about it? Because this isn't just a history lesson. This debate never really ended. Its echoes are all around us in pretty much every economic conversation we have today.
Seriously, just turn on the news. Anytime you hear people arguing about whether the Federal Reserve should raise interest rates or whether Congress should pass a new spending package, what you're really hearing are the echoes of Heller and Friedman, still battling it out.
And that leaves us with the same fundamental question that economists and policymakers are still wrestling with. In a world that's always changing and full of surprises, what's the safer bet? Do we put our faith in the flexible judgment of experts, or do we trust the steady, predictable hand of an unbreakable rule? There is no easy answer, and that is why this great debate is still so incredibly important.